This is draft season. My name is John Schmeelk, as always, joined by the boys, Eric Crocker and Tony Pauline. Draft season is presented by Tommy Hilfiger, a PVH brand and an official partner of the New York Giants. Sorry for the late episode this week. Recovering from 4 wisdom teeth getting pulled, not 100%. So I'm going to let these guys do most of the talking today as we recap a lot of the pro days that have happened, and we talk about the impact of free agency on the NFL draft, what teams might be doing. We're not going to talk about Wednesday's pro days like Ohio State, but everything before then, we are going to touch on. Boys, let's get right to it. Let's start with the two most recent ones, the two quarterbacks, Malik Willis and Kenny Pickett. Your guys' takes on those guys.
Well,
Go ahead, Tony.
I thought both of them had real good pro days, but the fact is this, after Malik Willis's pro day, I'm reading on the internet that people are now saying that Malik Willis and Kenny Pickett are going to be top 10 picks. You don't really elevate your draft stock all that much off of a pro day workout, especially when you're a guy like Malik Willis or Kenny Pickett or Sam Howell that have gone through the process, participated in the Senior Bowl, participated in the Combine. Desmond Ridder, another one. I mean, what happens is teams will go there and they will watch the workout and affirm what they believe in that prospect. Both of them deserve a lot of credit. They both threw the ball very well, but I don't think it's really going to help elevate those guys' draft stock. It's not like a team who wasn't looking at Malik Willis early in the draft all of a sudden did a 180 and said, wow, that's the guy we got to take after their pro day workout.
And I think sometimes with these guys and what, coaches or just the human element of things where you can get caught up in is seeing it in person and kind of feeling the player, the charisma, the way they carry themselves, and just seeing how the ball comes out their hands. And I think if anything did help Malik Willis kind of elevate, it would be that. Just, his looseness, the way he handled the pressure of that. And there are a lot of people that believe, just throwing in T-shirts and the shorts. And I'm like, man, I've been involved in those private workouts. Obviously not networks and television, ESPN, all that around, but just the pressure of it's you working out and all eyes on you from 70 front office people checking off every movement that you make, every step you take, looking and seeing if that's something that they want to, invest into their organization. There's a lot of pressure in that as well. So to see how Malik Willis kind of handled that and carried himself, and you see some of the smiles from the coaches that were watching, I think that's something where you see something on film and it's like, okay, we know where he is from the film perspective, but maybe, you start to like him a little bit more, the person, and say, you know what, I can work with this, that, because I like the person. So I think there is an opportunity for him to potentially get up there. How high, I don't know. And Tony, like you said, I've heard a ton of, he's a top 10 pick now. That might be a little bit of an overreaction, but it's clear that there are teams that will like him.
I'll tell you.
Two things on what Eric said. I agree 1,000% with everything Eric said, but therein lies the danger. The coach goes there, sees the pro day, and the coach falls in love with the guy after an hour workout and maybe dismisses the concerns of the scouting department that has watched this guy for the past 2 years. And it's not just Malik Willis. It can be any player. They go to a workout, they go to a combine. They don't really do the background work on a player, but they fall in love with them after a couple-hour workout, and they just forget about all the work the scouting department has put into this guy and maybe the criticisms. I think what really helped Malik Willis's draft stock more than anything else this week was Matt Ryan getting traded from the Atlanta Falcons to the Indianapolis Colts, and then they bring in Marcus Mariota because now the Atlanta Falcons are saying, we need a quarterback for the future. They were going to need one anyway with Matt Ryan there. But getting Matt Ryan out, bringing in Marcus Mariota, who's a bridge quarterback, says, hey, maybe Malik Willis could end up there.
And we'll get to those team needs impacted by free agency and all these trades, the Tyreek Hill trade. We'll touch on that second part of the show. Big piece of news from the pro days, other than the quarterbacks the last week, was the terrible thing that happened to David Ojabo. Pops his Achilles in his workout. It's just awful to see. How do you think, guys, this will affect him? Are we talking second round now or early third? What do you think the impact's going to be on his draft stock?
I still think he's going to go first. I think he can go late first round. I was thinking the Kansas City Chiefs because they need a young pass rusher. And I'm sure by the time David Ojabo is ready to play later on this season will be the same time that the Chiefs are just making their way through the late part of the year, through the playoffs. And I think Ojabo would be a great extra piece. Now, they just before we started taping this podcast, they traded Tyreek Hill. So we'll have to see if they go in that direction. I still think he goes in the first round. He's too great of a talent. With today's medical science, hopefully he's back sooner than later. More importantly, hopefully he's back 100%. It's a terrible thing that happened. You hate to see it. I hear people talking, well, we got to end pro day workouts. Is the exception to the rule. It's not the norm. It's not like this happens every year, but when it does happen, it's talked about a lot, and there's a big conversation about it.
Hey, just real quick, by the clock, real quick, real fast. Tony, I agree with you, but I do think if a guy does everything at the combine, I do think the pro day workout is a little bit, maybe you don't have to do that if you do everything at the combine. You know what I mean? But
here's the thing, and we talked about this yesterday, is what happens at a pro day workout is the coaches are right there. And the coaches will ask players to do team-specific drills.
All right,
they will ask quarterbacks to make certain throws that are relevant to their offense. They will ask a guy like Ojabo maybe to do a different drop or something that is relevant to the defense that they are going to implement, which they can't do at the combine. I understand it. Yeah, I mean, Ojabo had that combine, that great combine workout to fall back on. Why should he do anything? But that's why, besides the fact you're there to see non-combine players, you're also there to work out specifically some of the players and ask them to do certain things that are relevant to the offense, or in the case of Ojabo, defense that you're implementing.
You got something on Ojabo there, Croc?
Oh, yeah. So from my standpoint, it kind of reminds me of a few years ago. We have seen this happen before. Sidney Jones, that's definitely a guy that comes to mind. And I believe that he was going to be a first-round pick. He ended up going day 2. But there is another guy where if you are good enough and they think you're special enough of a talent, they still would take you. And Jeffrey Simmons, he still went 19th overall to the Tennessee Titans and came back later that year. Now, if I'm not mistaken, his injury was an ACL, I believe, and he still came back later in the year and played, obviously playing in the middle, on the defensive line, maybe not as much stress on your lower body. But, when you look at Ojabo, who I believe was potentially a top 15 pick, regardless, when is he going to be healthy? Achilles, typically with the Achilles injury, guys come back, 6 months, 7 months after the injury. So him having an injury like this in early March, given him, if he starts to rehab now, has a surgery, and, a team takes him, he still can be ready to play in October, definitely in November, and for sure in December to make a late playoff push. So if I'm a team and I loved his film and I liked what he was, obviously you might not get the best version of him this year. Even when he comes back, he'll be able to play and have some value. But the following year, he'll improve and be 100%. So I still think with the ability that he had, and I know his game is predicated on speed, but I think it's worth the investment. I'd still take him day 1.
Yeah, Jeffrey Simmons, just a note on that. Jeffrey Simmons tore his knee ligament in the beginning of February as he was training for the combine. So he didn't have the benefit of any sort of workout. He also had a lot of off the field issues, a lot of character questions. And he still went with the 19th pick, and he's turned out to be a heck of a player.
Yeah, and I'll just say too, these injuries, as you mentioned, can happen anytime. I think he popped his Achilles just running a drop back drill. That's something he's going to be doing with this trainer every day. So it's just hard to, it stinks. It's just hard to avoid these things. All right, Georgia had their pro day. I'll start with this, and you guys can take it any way you want. Nakobe Dean did not work out again. And given his size, I know he weighed in at 230 at the combine. He looked very slender to me when I saw him in Indy. I wonder if that's raising some red flags, where teams like, well, this guy didn't think he was going to work out well, combined with the size thing. Is this going to push him into the second round?
Well, 2 things. Number one, I'm told he will work out the beginning of April. He had an ankle injury from the playoff series, from the semi-final game, which hurt him through the national championship game. And you got to remember, for teams like Georgia, teams like Alabama, their season ended much later than everyone else's, and their combine training and their pro day training starts much later than everyone else, and they have to rehab from injuries. That's what I heard with Nakobe Dean. We'll see what happens. But John, you bring up a very interesting point about how guys are having injuries and they're using it not to work out. Let's see what happens. But I'm told that Booth the corner from Clemson that we've talked about here. It's a situation where he's saying, he's injured, may not run before the combine. I'm also told part of the reason is because he's not gonna break 4.6s in the 40. Tyler Linderbaum, who again didn't work out the combine, didn't work out at Iowa Pro Day, has a sprained foot. As far as I know, Tyler Linderbaum hasn't lifted weights, hasn't bench pressed. So he's got a sprained foot, and I don't see any marks for him for the bench press with 31-inch arms. So, you kind of bring up an interesting point in the sense that are some of these players using injuries as an excuse not to work out to hide athletic deficiencies? We'll see what happens, moving forward. Does Nakobe Dean work out? Does Booth from Clemson work out? What does Linderbaum from Iowa eventually do if he does anything at all?
I think sometimes with this guy, that might be the best way to go. I remember some years ago, and obviously covering the 49ers and watching them closely, Michael Crabtree was coming out. He didn't run a 40-yard dash, and he had the foot injury or whatever it was, and it kind of lingered to the point where, hey, he didn't have to run it, and he still went, top, I think, number 9 overall to the San Francisco 49ers. Now, his game wasn't predicated on speed, and he had all this production, like 2 of the best college years we've ever seen statistically. But, hey, it helped him for people to not see, dang, what if they would have seen 4.65 on paper? What would that have done to his draft stock? I think for a guy like Nakobe Dean, who the biggest thing, especially if you're going to be undersized like that, where he's like under 6 feet tall, he's right now under 230 pounds, you are a smaller linebacker. Your speed is going to be the biggest reason why someone potentially takes you first round. And if you feel like you have any questions that, oh, you know what, he doesn't have the speed that we thought, and he goes out there and he doesn't test as well, he's going to fall, because I think that's the best part of his game, or at least what teams are going to value. So from that standpoint, I get it. If you don't feel like you're going to run well, keep pushing it off. I know, Tony said he's going to run in April. Hopefully by then he's ready, because right after that, there's no way to make up for it. And I think that's the biggest reasons as to why, I'd encourage guys, hey, run at the combine, because at least you have your pro day or an April private workout to improve on that time. And I know for me, it helps. I remember seeing a cornerback out of Auburn right now, Roger McCreary. He did not run well. He ran 4.55. But then he goes to his pro day. He runs a 4.46. And now some of the questions about the speed now, like the 4.46 matches what we've seen on film. And it makes you a little bit more okay with it. So we'll see what happens with Nakobe Dean. But I know it has to be somewhat of a red flag for a lot of talent evaluators.
You better be an elite prospect if you choose not to work out, if you choose not to run the 40. I think the only guy I think Kyler Murray was the only guy who didn't run the 40 and do all that other stuff, but he was a quarterback. And when Cliff Kingsbury was hired as a coach, it was pretty much well known he was going to be the first pick. But if you are a cornerback and you are not running, that's going to raise a lot of questions. And you better have, especially if you are a second tier guy, bottom half of round 1 guy, and you better have a team that is really in love with you for you to have any chance to be a first round pick, if you so choose to be a first round pick. I mean, sometimes you're better off being a second round pick and getting to that second contract faster. You don't have, the allure, the esteem of being called a first round pick in the draft. But, you mentioned Michael Crabtree, understandable. I say Kyler Murray, but, we're talking about guys that are probably bottom half of round 1 type of guys that I think really need to work out.
Here's another guy real quick that chose not to either run 40 at the combine or at his pro day, and it did not work out to his benefit. Kevin Tolliver, cornerback out of LSU a few years back, decided not to run. And both times he ended up going undrafted, where I felt he would at the minimum be a mid-round pick, maybe an early day 3 pick. He didn't get drafted at all. And I think maybe those questions about his speed and him electing not to, return, as well as some maybe potential off-field stuff, is the reason why I don't even know if he's in the NFL still.
The unknown is the greatest variable. The unknown will kill a guy's draft stock more than anything else. After medicals, after a bad medical, questions that linger will kill somebody's draft stock, because you're not going to expend a pick and give them, a slotted contract if you don't have all the boxes checked off.
All right, let's jump to a bunch of guys that did not do combine stuff, but they did have their pro days. One, Daniel Lele from Minnesota. He did work out. Large man. When you look at a guy that size, how do you really judge in context what his workout numbers are?
I think what you have to you got to look at is, do you want a guy that large at that position? I mean, how is he going to be able to play the position at 375, 380 pounds? How well is he going to be able to play? Although he moves relatively well. And where do you take a guy like that? I think that's the big issue. We all talk about Jordan Davis's weight. And I mean, Filelli is massive at a position where, you've got to be relatively agile. So I think that regardless of what the testing numbers are, the weight is also something that's, the size has got to be a concern.
Yeah, and I think with a lot of those guys, especially the really tall, long guys, is being able to anchor and the power, and then some guys using your length and your height against you and being able to have better leverage and getting you. There is a saying in sports, low man wins. Sometimes when you are that tall and maybe if you don't have as much bend, guys can get underneath your pad level and kind of knock you back. And I see it happen with the 49ers and Mike McGlinchey a ton. He's terrific in the run game, but he's so tall, so long, and his movements are kind of long that sometimes guys are able to really kind of get him off of the edge with speed, and he kind of struggles a little bit to be able to be a consistent pass protector. Sometimes you can see it with guys that are like this large, this size, trying to play outside.
Yeah, and the NFL team is to bet, well, can we get 20 pounds off of him if we think that's necessary? Is he able to lose 20 pounds?
Yeah.
Some guys can't. So another question mark you throw in there for a potential day 2 pick. Tony, one of your guys, Isaiah Likely from Coastal Carolina, he ran, and I think we saw why he chose not to run in Indy. His times were not great.
I think with a guy like Likely, I think with some of the other guys, you've got to decipher between playing speed and 40 speed. As Eric probably will be able to tell you, part of the ability to run a good 40-yard dash is just know how to run. I mean, because running in shorts and a T-shirt is different. And this is not an excuse for Isaiah Likely, who I like a lot, but it's a different technique, start and everything else. With Likely, watching the film and his ability to consistently get downfield, I think he's one of those guys that fits the mold of plays faster than he times.
Listen, Tony, you are spot on with that. And real quick, I'll talk about like a situation with me, my experience with that. I had a workout in 2012 with the New Orleans Saints. And I went there. I killed my field drills, but I ran a 4.71. And the guy looked at me and said, "You don't know I run a 40, huh?" And I'm like, "Nah, I just got up and ran." Well, my agent sent me to California to work with a speed coach out there. I worked with this speed coach for 3 days and only 1 hour each day. Then I went and had a workout with the Philadelphia Eagles and then one with the Jets. I went from a 4.71 to a 4.53 just off working on my start for 3 hours. So that shows how much technique goes into running 40. Unless you're just somebody that just wakes up and is fast, which wasn't me. A lot of guys, you just got to learn the technique of it. And if you could do that and understand how to take as few steps as possible, really be able to jump out, understand little tricks of where to put your hand. Some guys like to put their hand way up, but as soon as you move that hand, that timer goes off. So I was taught to put it more near your hip and then throw it from there. And it kind of gives you just a little bit of an advantage. So once you start learning these little tricks and things, it all helps with the 40. So yeah, you're spot on with some guys not truly understanding exactly how to run it or just can't really get the technique down.
Well, let's jump to the other pro today, Texas A&M, and another tight end, Tony, Jalen Wademeyer, who I think we talked about a few weeks ago, and I said on tape, I didn't think he looked that fast, and then he runs an over 5 second 40. That's going to hurt him a lot, I would imagine.
5 second 40, 25.5 vertical jump. The school misreported as 35.5 inches. 9'1" broad. I mean, I spoke with a scout who was there. He said the only thing worse than Wadermeyer's marks were the way he looked performing them, because he just looked terrible and he looked sloppy. I had heard about this possibility back at the Senior Bowl. People from the school told me he was not getting under 4'9". And I talked to people who were close to him and said it's a situation where there's a lot of immaturity there, where he had a great freshman season at Texas A&M and they had no one there behind them to push him, and he kind of just coasted all along. I was incredibly high on him off the 2020 film. I watched the 2021 film. I was basically horrified because I had graded him so high, and I was like, "What happened here?" I think in the Auburn game he dropped 4 passes, and shook my bald head. I couldn't believe what was going on. This is unfortunately not a surprise to me because I'm told, there wasn't a lot of preparation or a lot of concentration on preparation, prioritizing on preparation. And I spoke with his agents about it. I spoke with his team about the comment. I said, this is what I'm hearing. And they were upfront with me. They said, we are concerned. And you saw the results yesterday. They were not good.
And then other guys.
Not good at all.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Well, it was not good at all. And what that tells me is, and I know Tony brought up the immaturity aspect of it in previous episodes. He's not working hard. Like, he's not working out hard. He's not preparing. And for a guy like this, that he's not the biggest or heaviest guy. I mean, 6'4", 255, that's pretty, standard for a tight end coming out. But to test it as terrible as he did, that tells me he didn't put any effort towards off-season training. And to me, if you're willing to kind of waste agents' money, because your agents, they front this stuff. And this money out of their pockets, they're depending on you. Hey, we're going to give you all the resources so you can have the most successful combine and pro day possible. And in turn, okay, we'll earn our money back. Well, you just said F you to them and their money when you go out there and put a performance like this. 25.5-inch vert. Like, my 5-year-old daughter could probably do that right now. She jumps on box jumps and things. So, to me, it's more disrespectful, like, not only to yourself, but to the people that have tried to invest in you as well.
6'4", 255, and you're a pass-catching tight end. It's not even that you're a good blocker. So, listen, here's a guy who, okay, I had him graded higher than most people, but a lot of people thought he was going to be a day 2 pick. He's probably dropped out of the draft altogether now.
How about Isaiah Spiller? How do you think he helped himself kind of, and where he's going to shape into this running back hierarchy? Croc, why don't we start with you?
This is a guy who I really like. I mean, running in the 4.63 obviously is not as well as some of the other guys that ran at the combine. You had, really all the other running backs, Breece Hall and all these guys, they were running in the 4.3s and low 4.4s. So it doesn't help himself. But I don't think as a running back, like, you have to be the fastest guy. So, okay, you ran low 4.6. I know there are some people that had him timed in the high 4.5s. I can live with that. I think he has legit 3-down back ability. I think he's a terrific pass catcher out of the backfield. He runs well. I think he shows enough power and shiftiness. He might not be guys' number 1 running back coming out because of the lack of athleticism on paper. But I think when you watch the film, he's still a good running back. I'm not going to knock him too much.
Yeah, if he's not the first running back taken, he'll be the second running back taken after Breece Hall. There's no doubt about it. He's a creative back. I mean, when you watch the film, he gets in trouble when he tries to run too much laterally, too much east-west running rather than take it up the field. He has the ability to create yards. Terrific pass catcher out of the backfield. So if he's not an early second-round pick, he'll be a mid to late second-round pick. But he's still, which may benefit him because he'll end up with a better team. But he's still a quality back.
All right, let's head over, guys. A lot of moves in free agency and stuff happening around the NFL, and that impacts, of course, needs and what teams might be thinking in the NFL draft. We'll kind of go in the draft order here and pick out about a little more than a half dozen teams. Let's start at the top. The Jaguars franchise Cam Robinson. I always thought they were going to go offensive tackle. Now I'm not so sure. They have Jamar Taylor over there. They have Greg Little on the roster as well. So are they looking pass rusher now, or do you still think they're going to be in conversation for an offensive tackle?
From everything that's coming out, they're leaning towards pass rusher, and it sounds like it's Aiden Hutchinson. Now, you see how that works with what they have right now, Josh Allen. I do believe they're a team that runs more of a 3-4 style defense. You've had Chase who they got from LSU a couple years back. He has 2 sacks in 2 years, and he's been on the field. He's playing in games, but the production isn't there. So I did think that it was a no-brainer. You got to address the offensive line here and protect your asset at quarterback. But I think right now, all the clues lean towards Hutchinson being the number 1 overall pick.
I mean, I never bought into the fact that they were taking an offensive tackle up there. And I said it here because there are no surefire, can't miss left tackles at the top of this year's draft. They all have big question marks. And then they go and they franchise Cam Robinson, which I believe just furthered what I had said all along. And the fact is, you can't miss when you're at the top of the draft. And Aiden Hutchinson may not be the player, as we've talked about a couple of times, that has the greatest amount of upside, but he's got the least amount of downside risk. I like when Eric Crocker brought up Kelvin Chason. Jacksonville has spent a lot of draft capital on that defensive front seven, on that defensive line of pass rushers, whether it be Chason, whether it be Josh Allen, Tavon Bryan a couple of years ago, who basically was also a bust. I think in the perfect world, Jacksonville would rather trade down a few spots and maybe take a cornerback like Ahmad Gardner, somebody like that, and get some extra selections. But if they stay at number one, I never thought it was going to be an offensive tackle, because the offensive tackle on my board is 3 or 4 down the board with the 2 pass rushers at the top.
Yeah, I will happily take the L on that. If that means one of those top 2 tackles drops to the Giants at number 5, I'd be very happy about that. Let's go to pick number 3 with the Houston Texans, guys. They do renegotiate Laramie Tunsil's contract. Now, they can still trade him if they want, obviously. What do you think they're looking for now? Because to me, they're a roster that's bare. They finally trade Deshaun Watson. They're in the middle of a rebuild. So is it really just best guy? Do you look for a building block at a premium position? What do you think their process will be here?
Well, and they've got multiple draft picks coming back from Deshaun Watson. So they do have an additional pick in the first round. So I think Cesario, what he's going to try and do is he's going to try and maneuver around, whether it means maneuvering up, which I don't think will happen, maneuvering down, getting extra selections. And all along, he's going to pick best player available within reason that fits the mold. They need offensive linemen. They need help at the safety position. They need pass rushers. I guess this would be the first kind of spot to look and see does Kayvon Thibodeau end up there, because that's the kind of pass rusher that Cesario has liked, or Cesario has had success with when he was with the New England Patriots, those smaller, speedy, quick, explosive edge rush guys. This is probably one of the first serious consideration landing spots for Kayvon Thibodeau. If he doesn't go here, we'll see, how far he slides down.
I know for me, when I look at the Houston Texans, and this is a little bit out of left field, but I kind of like Sauce Gardner at this spot. And I know, they run this cover 2 system. You look at what they've had at the cornerback position. They're trying to piece things together by having guys like Desmond King out there. Last year they had Mitchell. That's not as ideal. They run a little bit more cover 2 and 2 high. But I think if you want a guy who has all the physical capabilities of being terrific in this, and with the eyes that he has, man, it's Sauce Gardner. 6'3", 200 pounds, ran low 4.4s, which was tremendous for him for a 4.1. I think that puts him more in the kind of like elite type prospect category. You look at what he did in college, the production he had, didn't give up a touchdown. Saw some crazy stats saying he didn't even give up more than 13 yards to any one receiver this past year. Now, he ain't playing in the SEC, so it's not like he's getting challenged week in and week out. But just some of the ability, even in the Alabama game, when I watched him, and I talk a lot about this thing called pressure key, visual key, especially in zone, where pressure key is the guy I can get my hands on while I'm reading my visual key. And he did a good job of being able to get his hands on one, squeeze that until something flashed that threatened the zone, come off of that, and make really good tackles. So I think he'd be tremendous in his Lovie Smith defense. He's a playmaker. He also has the ability to be able to play man-to-man. I think he moves the needle right away for them. But if it's not him, I do hear, and everyone I talk to with Houston, they're saying Kyle Hamilton. Now, I know that's not going to make Tony happy, but that's what they're kind of saying. They need a safety. They just like lost Justin Reed, and they could be looking to add someone that has really high upside there.
The other thing I'll say is, what kind of safeties did Cesario have at New England? I mean, he had the smaller, quicker guys. They didn't have these big body. And correct me if I'm wrong, but they didn't have big-bodied safety. So again, look where he came from, the type of player that he had a lot of success with in New England.
Yeah. All right, McCourty and those type of guys. Patrick Chung, like guys that can be very versatile, and they ask those guys to do a ton. Watching New England, their defense on film was some of the funnest time I've ever. I'm not like, I'll watch film because I just like the process, but watching some of the different things they do in man, they ran like this man match defense. I've never seen it before. I was like, what the heck is this? I had to get guys like McCourty on the phone, some of my buddies that knew him, and he explained to me what they were doing. It was some really good stuff, but you need safeties that are very versatile. And if you're, Kyle Hamilton, we talked about him being a little bit longer movement skills. I don't think he has the same type of ability as a McCourty, who can do more things in coverage.
Yeah, you're almost looking to convert a corner to play safety rather than getting the bigger guy. No question. All right, let's group these next three teams together. Panthers at 6, Falcons at 8, Seahawks at 9. Are all three potentially in the quarterback business now? Is that too much of a reach? The Falcons, Mariota, the Seahawks, Drew Lock, the Panthers, Sam Darnold. Do you reach just for need? How do you think those three teams are going to consider their options here at those particular spots?
I think with the Panthers, you got to say no. You have a coach who's really on a hot seat.
Yep.
And there's 2 times where I'm like, you don't take a quarterback top 10. One, your first year as a head coach, because that guy can likely get you fired. You're putting all your eggs in the basket of an unproven rookie or unknown rookie. And then a guy on a hot seat. So you look at where Matt Rule is right now, and I know it's not ideal to have to play with Sam Darnold, but I'd have to go with a veteran quarterback. He can't hitch his wagon to a Malik Willis or a Kenny Pickett because he won't see it the next year for it to play out.
Trade for Baker, right? Trade for Baker.
Or trade for Baker.
Yeah.
I would go with that over Sam Darnold or a rookie at this time right now in that scenario. So I'd say Panthers, these 3 teams, they definitely got to be out.
I mean, the Panthers are always seem to be eternally looking for a quarterback, but Eric's right on the money. I mean, if you are Matt Rule, the last thing you want to do is draft a quarterback with that 6th pick, and then you've got to rely on him to win because you're going to be out at the end of the season. Now, what I'm hearing in Carolina is they're not meshing the front office. They're not in cohesion. You know, Rule's been there for a while, but this is Fitterer, the general manager. This is his 2nd year. So, you know, he's the guy that may want to go take the quarterback at 6. We'll see what happens moving forward. I don't think they take a quarterback at 6, but I know there's a lot of disagreement there, if you will, in that front office. As far as the Falcons are concerned, I mean, you have to say that they got to consider it. Whether you look at their moves, as I mentioned earlier, trading Matt Ryan, bringing in Marcus Mariota. The Seattle Seahawks, one last thing. I don't know that there's a lot of interest for Carolina with Baker Mayfield. I've told that Baker Mayfield doesn't want to go there. That may change as you get closer to the draft, but
he might not have a choice.
Well, he may not, but again, you know, just for the purposes of what I reported yesterday, the team that gets Baker Mayfield is going to be the team that is willing to take on the largest amount of his contract because Cleveland is backed into a corner right now. You know, they traded for Deshaun Watson. They gave him that huge contract. They're also on the line for almost $19 million for Baker Mayfield because they picked up that 5th-year option. So if you want Baker Mayfield, you can say, okay, we'll give you a 5th-round pick or a 4th-round pick, but we're only going to pay $10 million of that $19 million contract. If you don't want to pick up the $9 million, we're not interested. So that's something to watch as far as the Baker Mayfield trade is concerned. As far as Seattle, you never know what Seattle's going to do. I mean, every time you think they're going right, they go left. Every time, you know, they take a Jordan Brooks in the 1st round, guys that you wouldn't think were 1st-round picks. On paper, they need a quarterback. But their history, as you know, with Russell Wilson, is get the quarterback later. They could trade down and then maybe take one of those quarterbacks later on if they're able to trade down rather than selecting a signal caller at 9.
Yeah, I can't imagine Pete Carroll at his age is going to want to invest in some, you know, green 21-year-old that needs 2 years to develop. It doesn't seem like that's something he would want to do.
Especially since there was talk that Pete Carroll was out after last year and he saved his job. So absolutely.
I'm with you. And I agree. I think the Falcons are a good spot there. And I think Malik Willis, given the success Michael Vick had down there, a shorter, mobile quarterback with a ton of arm talent, I could see that being somewhere that they might want to look. Maybe they trade down too. I think the AFC West is interesting. That's kind of an arms race right now. The Chargers pick at 17. Do they have to pick an offensive tackle? You know, Storm Norman right tackle was a huge liability for them last year. Is that like, all right, Ryman, Penning, whoever's left, is that who they have to pick pretty much?
I won't pretend like I watched every game from the Chargers, but if what I saw in week 18 was any indication of what was going on at the right tackle position for a majority of the season, then you have to address it. I mean, Herbert could barely drop back and get to the top of his drop before he was getting pressured by Crosby. Now, Crosby is a terrific edge rusher, but you got to be able to protect him more than that. I like what they did. You know, you got Gerald Everett. You brought back Mike Williams. Obviously, Keenan Allen's still there. So I think from a pass catcher standpoint, you're good. On the defensive side of the ball, they brought in Khalil Mack. They got J.C. Jackson. So if it looks like they're adding guys at every level. The one position that they did not make any additions to in free agency so far or any moves, it was the offensive line or the tackle position. So I think at 17, and this is a deep tackle class, you got to hope that somebody falls to you that you feel is worthy of being able to replace who you have right now at that tackle position and step in and be able to protect your franchise quarter just a year after drafting Slater, who had a tremendous year.
I know they also want to improve the interior defensive line. I know they'd like Jordan Davis, but Jordan Davis is not going to be there. I don't think Trevor Penning is going to be there unless they make a move up. So I think if they really want an offensive tackle or they want a defensive tackle like Jordan Davis, they are going to have to move up, or you're going to have to wait to day 2 to get one of the tackles that falls down. So also a couple of real good offensive tackles left in free agency, which could be had for a bargain, which would be an improvement over what they have at the right tackle position right now.
All right, let's go to 2 teams that recently lost their veteran quarterbacks to retirement, Drew Brees and Ben Roethlisberger, Saints and Steelers. Are they going to be in the quarterback market? The Saints also lost their offensive tackle, Teron Armstead, to the Dolphins. How do you think, Eric, those 2 teams might address their picks here in the mid-first round?
Yeah, I mean, start with the Saints. Obviously they brought back Jameis Winston. And when you kind of dive in, I know you just look at the stat sheet, 14 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He had a high number of touchdowns in 2 of those games that they played. Now, not going to knock him for throwing a bunch of touchdowns, but if you actually look at as a whole how he played in most of those games, it wasn't great. And they bring him back. I do think that he's someone that they are likely trying to improve over, but he can be someone that is a holdover for a year or 2. Well, maybe you draft a guy. We talked about the Seattle Seahawks and Pete Carroll being older, not wanting to wait to develop a quarterback. I think where the Saints are, new head coach, I think Allen is going to be there for a while. I think you have the time to be able to draft a Kenny Pickett or a Malik Willis, and I think this is more so where they should be taken, at least those 2 guys, and not have to play them right away because you have Jameis Winston who, he can play serviceable football. And then if he is kind of doing some weird things and turning the ball over a lot, if he gets back to that, then eventually you can replace him with a guy, but it won't be as much pressure on the quarterback or the coach. So I like the Saints potentially definitely adding a quarterback first round.
Yeah, I thought all along they could take Malik Willis. I just don't know that he's going to be there now. I agree with Eric. This is probably where he should go, but he's going to be overdrafted. I think the Saints basically dug their own hole because they had an ample opportunity to address the quarterback position in the past. They were taking the Reese kid from Michigan, interior offensive lineman. Good player, but could have been pick would have been better spent elsewhere. I do think it'll be an offensive player. I mean, will they take Kenny Pickett at 18? In my opinion, that's a significant stretch.
And I think the Steelers, signing Trubisky, by the way, I think that's a great placeholder. If they can move up to go get Malik Willis, I think that's a great fit for him too. If they really want to make that investment in a quarterback and let him sit behind Mitch for a couple of years, the Steelers have that organizational capacity, I think, to do something like that when a lot of other teams, I don't think, would have the patience to leave Willis on the bench as long as he has to be in order for him to learn the NFL game.
And that was their game plan. As I reported from the Combine, their game plan was to get a free agent quarterback. And I'd said that Mitch Trubisky was the apple of their eye, and then draft Malik Willis. The question is, as you said, they can't sit there and wait for Willis to fall to them. They're going to have to be aggressive. So if it's not Willis in round 1, is it a Desmond Ridder in round 2? I do think that is the plan to come out of this year's draft in the first round, maybe the second round, with a younger quarterback to sit and develop and let Mitch Trubisky, run the team for at least a year.
All right, let's jump to the end of the first round now. 2 teams lost their star wide receivers. The Chiefs trading Tyreek Hill, the Packers trading Devontae Adams. They select the Packers at 22 and 28, Chiefs now at 29 and 30. Is this going to be like an end of the first round now where teams going to be jockeying for position to get the wide receiver they want, Croc?
Yeah, I think if you're the Packers, maybe if you pick at 22, you'll have at least your shot at getting the guy that you want. Remind me a couple years ago, in around that same pick, maybe pick 22, Philadelphia Eagles were on the clock, and it was like, all right, got all these guys that we can look into. Do we want Rager? Do we want Jefferson?
Jefferson, yeah.
Do we want Brandon Ayuk and T. Higgins? they had their pick first and they went with Rager. They kind of chose wrong. With the Packers, they'll have their pick of kind of that late round, first round guy. And I think there'll be a plethora of receivers there. Just got to make sure you pick the right guy. I don't think they double up. I know that was part of the question. Do they double up on receivers? I wouldn't say that. I think you get one guy, and that could be your fifth-year option guy, and then maybe second round or third round, you come back and get another guy that maybe has a different skill set. But definitely, they should take one in the first round. Now, if you know anything about the Packers, sometimes they do things that we don't think they should do, especially when it comes to drafting receivers. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if they're like, nah, we're going to address some other positions like a linebacker that they did, or drafting an A.J. Dillon in the second round, things that I thought was kind of weird at the time. And clearly, or Jordan Love in the first round, all these things that pisses Aaron Rodgers off.
I'm glad you used that term, because I was going to say they look like it's almost like they purposely got to cheese off their fans there if you get the pun. But listen, I think one of the happiest guys right now, especially with that Tyreek Hill trade, is Marquez Valdez-Scantling, the free agent receiver from the Green Bay Packers, who's now watching his value increase. I think Packer fans will be happy. I don't think they're going to double up on pass catches, because you can get a good receiver in round 2, get a good receiver in round 3. But I think absolutely with that first pick, a guy like Treylon Burks, if he's there, I think that fits the mold of what the Packers like to do and the type of receiver that the Packers have developed in the past. Jahan Dotson would be an interesting pick, although that's still a little bit early for his services as far as my board is concerned, even though I like Jahan Dotson a lot.
And then the Chiefs, you wonder, with all this extra draft cap and all that, they got all these extra picks in the Hill trade, would they be willing to move up? If there's a receiver they really like to replace Tyreek Hill, you need explosive receivers in that offense. Do you think that might be something they would consider? And look, if you really want to replace Tyreek Hill, right, just draft Jameson Williams. It's going to take him a few months to get on the field, but in terms of speed and explosiveness, that's the guy, right? If you want to fill Tyreek Hill role, Jameson Williams is your guy.
Well, I don't think anyone is Tyreek Hill. And that's a tough thing. And if you're chasing Tyreek Hill and that type of guy, more than likely you're going to miss. But I do think, a guy like Jameson Williams brings that explosibility to the offense. They got a couple of guys there. I mean, Juju Smith, we'll see how much of an impact does he have consistently. Obviously, Travis Kelce, he's going to be the target hog. And then Mecole Hardman, what is going on with him? Is he going to take that next step? They've been waiting a few years for it. But if they are going to go to receiver position in the draft, I like Jameson Williams, but you can't say, all right, Jameson Williams, you're now going to be our Tyreek Hill.
That's fair.
I think that's
very
a
fair.
little bit too much pressure on the guy. But going to a Kansas City Chiefs, we'll make it to where, we do got pass catchers in place. We can get by until Jameson Williams is ready to get on the field.
And remember, Tyreek Hill is a 5th round pick, I believe, a late day 3 pick. I think they could go receiver. I think they could also go pass rush. I think this would be a perfect spot for David Ojabo. I mean, they redid Frank Clark's deal, and when everyone thought they were going to get rid of him, you still got Melvin Ingram out there. They're going to need a pass rusher. They're going to need a young pass rusher. And the fact is this, it's going to be tough to replace Tyreek Hill, although Patrick Mahomes seems to, spin gold out of hay, if you will. If you draft a guy like David Ojabo, you get him ready, just as I said earlier, for your stretch run in December through the playoffs with a young pass rusher who can relieve some of those veteran guys. Could they go receiver to replace Tyreek Hill? Well, if they can get a receiver, I don't know if he's going to replace Tyreek Hill, but I also think that this is a good spot for Ojabo.
All right, lightning round. Dallas, they lose a wide receiver, Cooper, offensive tackle, La'el Collins, and a pass rusher in Randy Gregory. They pick 24th. Where do you think they're going?
They got to get back to their roots, man, and address that offensive line. Like when the Cowboys were good a few years back and a very dominant team up front and leaning on that run game, and they had the offensive line working in cohesiveness as one unit, and they were pretty dominant doing that. And that was with a young Dak Prescott. Give him some offensive linemen now, get him some help there, and protect him so he can be as comfortable. And they got pass catchers. They will have to address the receiver position at some point, but if I'm them at 24, I'm leaning more towards offensive line.
It depends on who's there. First of all, I guess they're going to roll the dice on Terrence Steele, but I think a guy like Tyler Smith of Tulsa would be an intriguing and interesting player there. Has to be in the conversation. A lot of people think that Tyler Smith, who had a terrific pro day, who's a very bright, intelligent guy, is one of those Jonathan Ogden types. Now, stay with me for a second. I'm not saying he's Jonathan Ogden, but you start him at guard, as he develops his game. Remember, he's only a third-year sophomore. He's a young guy as he develops his game, and then he kicks him out to tackle. So if you draft Tyler Smith and you start him at guard, and Terrence Steele turns out not to be your guy for the future at right tackle, there's always a chance that you can move that Tyler Smith out to right tackle. From everyone I've talked to, Tyler Smith has established himself as the 5th best tackle in this draft. After Evan Neal, after Kwanu, after Charles Cross, after Trevor Penning, then it's Tyler Smith. And teams may reach for him earlier because of the fact that he's established himself as such.
I can see Zion Johnson as a possibility there, too, if you want to pick someone a little bit safer as well. All right, guys, good stuff. Next week, we'll have our first draft season mock draft. Make sure everybody comes by and checks it out and tunes in, and we'll have some fun with that a month out from the NFL draft. For Tony and Eric, I'm Schmeelk. Remember, subscribe to the Draft Season Apple Podcast, leave a 5-star positive review, and we'll see you next time.